Hey everybody, thanks for watching Reality Check. I'm Jay Weidner, and today our guest is again Jonny Enoch. We're going to be talking about the technologies that are going to reshape our future. I know the last show kind of freaked you out, so we're going to freak you out some more. Anyway, here we go. Jonny Enoch, Reality Check.
Right now, the most important thing is, like we said, is trade deficits. That's what this is mainly, or I have to reword that so that we can stay within the boundaries of the algorithms out there. It appears that the main modus operandi, or the purpose of this happening at the moment, is due to the fact of keeping these deficits going. So you might find that certain places will open before others. Some will continue to be closed into next year. So having this knowledge that we're going to be stepping into this new shifting, like you said, I have heard the same thing. I have heard that, first of all, HIV/AIDS was an old, antiquated biotechnology. It is out the window. That the good news is that one can be removed from the picture. Cancer, a lot of those things will be edited out. The model is to give an upgrade to the human genome and clean up a lot of things that have been in there. And
What I've heard, yeah.
Because of that, there are those that are out there that have been immunologically challenged, or other things that most certainly, as this goes out, will have problems. Now, I want to bring back something that a physicist named Arthur Newman, who went by the name Henry Deacon, said years ago. I think that people should go back and watch what he said very carefully back at Project Camelot and those sorts of things he said, and I think he was brilliant. The man was so brilliant, he had to disappear out of the scene quickly. He said that there would be weaponized pathogens that would come into the world. He said that some of these would be able to do racial genetic targeting. So let's just look at all the warnings that you've had with those My Family Tree genetic sites. Again, I'm not saying that they're out there. I'm just, these have been alleged out there, that sites like 23andMe, that they're collecting your genetic information, that they're literally mapping out the entire human genome. And we're looking at stuff from statistical projections. So they might say that, to represent everybody, we want to have a representation of everybody into these particular geographic areas, that you could say that there could be very unique mutagenetic features here, so that it could be mutated in certain ways, or there could be certain strains that could very quietly and silently look like an act of God to trim certain populations in certain areas that potentially look there. Now, one thing a lot of people bring up,
Well, wait a minute.
they'd like to bring this up.
Okay, yeah, I want to get to that, but I just got a question. Okay, so eugenics and all that, trimming the population so that maybe they're racist and they don't like a certain race and they can target that race and everything. But is that going to even matter when everybody has designer babies? Because everybody's just going to choose whatever baby's skin color and eye color and hair color anyway, what it's going to look like. And so everything's going to get all really mixed up at that point. Which is maybe a good thing. I don't know. I don't know. I think that they're going to let us, if we survive, they're just going to let us die away. I think the design.
Yeah, I don't think
actually where they.
I don't think they're picking favorites.
Yeah, I do too. I think they're picking favorites. I agree with that.
Yeah, so as they go through that, there's that kind of combination. Now, a lot of people on the internet have been talking about saying, could this be a culprit that's creating this thing? Now, I want to reiterate something I said before, that, again, I'm not saying that I love this thing and I'm going to go hug one of the towers or anything. It does have being the milliwatts and the radiation and being at a very low level of microwave and whatnot. Of course, there are health consequences to any of these things. There's consequences to our current devices that we have. There's consequences to Wi-Fi. There's consequences to all these things. But again, in the briefings I've had and in the communications I've had with some very knowledgeable people in these areas, they have said to me that it most certainly is something that we will adapt to and move through very quickly. It's sort of like in 1903, that when we were very afraid of the automobile or the locomotive, as you and I discussed before, of going over 30 miles per hour, that you'd have inertia or spontaneous combustion. We were very concerned about that. We were worried. Again, when we have megahertz, gigahertz, kilohertz, terahertz, we haven't even begun to explore these things, and we're going to go further into them, and eventually we're going to go to the quantum. But you might say, what is the purpose for the need to rapidly put these up everywhere? It's not to microwave your brain out. That's not why they're doing it. The reason is that when you want to have these for not only curfews in the future, and you want to have those for delivery purposes and tracking and tracing and technologies, you need a greater infrastructure, that you need a faster infrastructure and something that is going to be on that level. What I was told is that if you wanted to mutate this, you would need a very specialized version of, let's say, a 9G, and you would have to be able to direct it, geospecifically direct it at a higher amplification, and you could very specifically mutate it like microwaving something at that level. And so I wouldn't put it past them on that particular level for how there is a longer rollout of always having some kind of threat with it. When we were talking about the immunity passports, though, Jay, what I was told is that we would move very quickly to having something like a Zone A, Zone B, and Zone C. And this is going to geographically limit the movement of people and track them. So in the sense that if you're someone like an average Joe that wants to take a holiday or go see somewhere, you'd have a Zone A for the privileged immunity immunizations that the privilege that they would give you. Zone B, you might be someone a little bit more important involved in business, or a Zone C, you could go into, if you're really very important, you'd be able to go all over the world to relocate or move, because there'd be various herd immunities in the structure. But I was told that we would be undergoing a massive change. And as you mentioned, Jay, this is not only cyclic, it's also ancient. The Egyptians believed it, and the cycles of the Kepher and everything else, that essentially the cycle that we're moving through in the transformation is that after May of this year, things will start to kind of go back to some semi-normalcy. Not normality, but normalcy is when you pretend that things are normal. It will go into this normalcy where things will start to open up. The U.S. and most places will be more ahead of most areas. There's going to be areas like Canada that are absolutely following orders very, very well, and they will be slower. There'll be parts in Europe that will remain closed. But during the summer, things will be kind of choppy here and there, and the markets will pick back up, because that's a big part of this. The markets will pick back up. People will be saying, hey, this is going great. And then drop into the fall. We know there are some things taking place in the background. You might say there's in-house fighting in these various groups behind the scenes, and some of their guys might have some legal challenges on the front stage of the circus. The idea is that they know that once the hammer drops, because no matter which way you look at this, you can be the greatest optimist, positive person out there, which I am, and I know you are. We're positive thinkers. We know that economically what's happening right now is not sustainable, and the bottom is about to drop out. And going into that, Jay, I want to ask you, what have you heard about that end of September period?
Well, Jordan Maxwell told me a lot of interesting things about what he's heard. And I'm going to say that there's going to be a revisit of the CV, of the virus. Mm-hmm. And it's going to shake everything up, because we're already going to be staggering from what's happening right now, and that there may not be an election. That's what I've heard. And,
yes.
It seems hard to believe there could be an election right now with Joe hiding in the basement. And I mean, everything just seems so surreal on the political front that it seems hard to believe there could even be a convention where they allow 5,000 people to get together like that. And the answer is probably not. And so you can see they're changing everything. I mean, our sports is being changed. We can't go to movies now. I mean, this is really an amazing thing that they're pulling off here. And it's all part of this future. There probably isn't going to be movies in the future. There's probably not going to be team sports, especially if they're taking the warrior gene out of us. Nobody's going to play football or hockey. So I think that that's what this is about. Get us psychologically used to what the next phase is going to be. And this is, of course, the big plan for what's it called? 20. What's the 2030 plan that the United Nations has?
Yeah, there's the 2030 plan is the first stage. That most certainly is the first stage of where you're going with it. But you're right. The masks are going to be the new norm in certain periods. They're going to have periodic times. They're already talking about the second wave. And they talk about it with such knowing that, hey, this second wave is going to be a nasty thing. So you're right. Also, when you talk about this election, I've been told something similar, that when you go back and look at FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, that he was able to, there was an extension of terms when you have an emergency crisis on your hands, or wartime positions, or you have scandals in other areas, that you can circumvent those things. So what is the next modus operandi? Well, we know that there's been a lot of preparation for things, emergency drills and planning. Why would you need these drones? Why would you need all of this? Because if you're having an economic reset, you know something major is coming. And I want to, before we go any further into this, I want to say that one of the greatest things we can do, and I'm not trying to sound new age or anything like that, but is to center yourself today, all of you watching this, to center yourself with that place in the universe, whether you call it the Great Spirit, Source, the Creator, that to center yourself with that infinite love that is out there, and absolutely bring it into yourself as that perspective of how we can make it through this period is not by getting into a position of superstition, ignorance, and fear, but in simply to empower yourself and to move through peacefully in a harmonization, to know that there is good that will come on the other side of it, because we are going to get through some rough patches. There's going to be some growing pains, but ultimately we will get through it. And you were talking about, you know, this idea that in the past you had written an article even on the 322, Jay. The last few years we've seen these movies come out called The Purge.
Yep.
And The Purge, it's very interesting. A lot of people don't know this. The date in The Purge for the yearly purge is 322, which is interesting symbolically what they're trying to tell us. But we know that they've been preparing for some time. Again, I'm not saying that this is the key reason why, why there's people out there that are legalizing weed, for example, because I think that, there's so many great benefits to these sort of things. But perhaps this is why there's been very generous legislation that has been passed to make relaxing recreational substances available out there. Perhaps this could be a reason why there has been an effort to water down the Second Amendment. Perhaps this has been a reason why there has been certain restrictions and means to look at where people are going, to keep people from absolutely going bonkers. But there is perhaps some great changes that we will see in the fall. And you mentioned Jordan Maxwell. So Jordan, who I know is a dear friend of yours also, and he absolutely loves you. When I was out, I know you do. When I was out for dinner with him and his astrologer friend, Joe, we were out in Los Angeles last year. Joe told me over dinner, he's a very good astrologer. He uses like a lot of old Nostradamus systems. He said to me, Johnny, he goes, there's going to be a period in March of next year when the shit is going to hit the fan and things are going to go crazy. And recently I got a call from him and he says, see, I told you so. And exactly. And he said the same thing. He said, at the end of September, he said, I think around September 29th, from the period of September 29th, he said, astrologically and everything, when you look at Saturn and Pluto and all these things, he said there was going to be a period for 1 year and 4 months when just after the summer, he says, it looks like things are coming back up. And he says, the bottom will drop out. And he says there's going to be this great transformational shift. Not to say that things are totally inoperable and we can't live our lives, but that things are going to change. Now, that's interesting that this sort of adds up with what you've been told over the years also.
Yeah, my best advice is to grow food, folks, because they're also creating a food shortage. The CV is causing workers to not go to work on farms and in food processing plants. And I think this is going to be part of the population reduction. They like to use starvation as one of their things. And that's why it's important that you brought up the purge. For those who don't know, the purge is a series of movies about one night a year, everybody can do anything they want. It's total and complete anarchy. People would kill each other and steal, and it's quite horrifying. And if there are food shortages, and you have to, and I think they're coming, then you have to kind of extrapolate what the next step after the food shortage is, and that is a lot of desperate people looking for food. And I think that's why the Purge movies were made. They're like to signal ahead of time, as you know, what's going to happen, and they use movies all the time to do this. And so the Purge movies are very important. If they pick the date, 3/22 is their night. So I think we're in for a lot of chaos in the short term. And then you're going to see this dramatic series of events begin. I would say starting at the end of this year, after this thing that happens in October, I think they're going to freeze the election. Trump will become president. He may be the last president, and they're going to start their changes, and they're going to be patches and CRISPR technology, and everybody has to ask themselves what they want to do with this knowledge. I mean, this is like serious stuff. This is the final transformation in their plans for us. And it's interesting because there's a great book by, I forget his name now. It's called Sex, Time, and Power. And it's about how women control evolution. It's very interesting. And women lately have chosen to ignore, for the most part, but get rid of aggressive males. It's no aggressive males. Women used to be attracted to aggressive males, and they're not attracted to them anymore, probably because they beat their children and all these other things. So I think a lot of the women are going to be glad that the warrior gene is taken out of men, because they're sick and tired of that thing and causing trouble and all that. I don't know how I feel about it. I really don't. I can see there's no way back from all of this. I know that. And I don't know what I'm going to do personally. I'm going to try to avoid it as long as I can. But again, we're not saying we're for it or against it. We're only reporting what we hear and letting you guys take that knowledge and do with whatever it is that you can with it.
Yes. And another thing is, Jay, I was told that by the year 2024 to 2025, that it's our way of life, the way we do things is going to be so different. You might find that when you go to airports and hospitals and whatnot, that we've been talking a lot about UV light, that you might have light scanning for your body, for your hands, for just moving through airports and whatnot. As you mentioned, there's going to be new types of meat. You're seeing that come out now, that there's going to be new types of lab-grown meat that they will try to introduce as saying, okay, there's food shortages, so you need that now. And the meat will be crossed with, octopus and other kinds of things, even if you have like a beef that they're creating so that it has the characteristics or traits that it doesn't decompose as easy, having these marine genetics in it. They're going to try most certainly to introduce new ways like this, but the technology is what's going to make a huge difference, as well as we go through this transition, they're going to make it so they're going to roll it out so it's a little easier to shift through it, so it's not total pandemonium. The first level is they're going to give you something called universal basic income. Yeah. Now, that's already being rolled out in places like Spain. They tested it in Finland. It basically, what they're calling a stimulus check in Canada and the US is permanent. It will be increased to about $2,500 a month. Now, I do want to say that some alternative researchers that have presented this have said that the reason this is being released is to sort of remove businesses and all that. They won't remove business, I was told in my briefings. I was told that what they would do is there still would be small businesses. There'd still be businesses. You could earn more money if you wanted to. It's just that a lot of debt is going to get reset. A lot of things are going to be turned over very, very quickly. And this will happen as a giant transformative process. And how I was told it would happen is that one day you'll wake up and they're not going to go over to a microchip system or anything crazy overnight like that, because that would scare most people, would, bury their head in a hole. It will be released like this. Your current debit cards, your current charge cards, your mortgages and all that will just be rolled over to the new IDC pardon me, or international digital currency or something on those lines. And it may not include everywhere. You see China's rolling out their own blockchain right now. They're ahead of the game. You'll find Russia's doing that similar. They have their own internet systems as well that are compartmentalized. So down the road, you might find that it might look like or a centralized digital currency that will be, let's say, the US, the UK, some European countries, and maybe Canada will branch onto that eventually, and then it will spread out through those particular means. And this is kind of like what the EU did. And this is very clever because, first of all, you'll operate this on a health situation that's being tracked, and then it refers over to a digital identity, and then so on and so forth is sort of the mechanism that they would use to do that. Now, moving past 2024, 25, Jay, I was also told that there are gigantic geological changes happening that we're not being told about. And they aren't telling us about it, but they're silently preparing for this with seismic upgrades. Now, what this is about, too, I think they also kind of think that, hey, we might end up taking ourselves out a little bit if we have a kind of a civil disruption. At the same time, there could be some cataclysmic destruction that we can rebuild from it and move forward. But again, some of this might either dwindle some of the population or otherwise. What we look at with this is that I was told that our changes that we're having, these weather changes that some people call global warming, what that really is being caused by is these cyclic changes on Earth that are being shifted not only through our polar vortex, but due to something called our spatial coordinates.
That's right.
So I know you've heard this before.
Yeah.
But you know how our Earth is in communication with our star through the speed of light, right? Every 8 minutes. So that is changing on not only our patterns, but where we're going cyclically. So next year, you're going to see that starting next year, there's going to be crazy weather patterns, like stuff you have never seen before. These weather patterns are going to get crazier and crazier. And also there's something in our Earth that's called the underwater mantle, and it's building this pressure. There's more water under the Earth than there is on the Earth's surface with all our oceans, and it's building pressure. So there are certain underground areas, like even out in Colorado, by Denver, by the airport, over in London, expensive water filtration systems that they're building around the world, in Norway, outside of Moscow. They're preparing on a large level for something, but they don't want to alarm folks that in the future that we have cataclysmic potentials also.
And you can also see that with like Elon Musk and some of the statements
right
lately. And the sun's electromagnetic field is collapsing, and that's causing a commensurate collapse of ours. That's going to let in more radiation, cosmic rays. That tickles the atmosphere and causes clouds to form. It also penetrates the ground and causes seismic activity to increase. You're going to see volcanoes increase. You're going to see earthquakes increase. And 2025 is just about the very start of when it gets really serious. They know all this. They've seen the cycles. They know this. It's like they're painting a picture of one thing while another thing is happening, and they're preparing themselves for the other thing while telling us not to worry.
Musk knows, as you pointed out. Yeah. Musk knows. That's why he has what's called the 2025 initiative to go to Mars. He's very serious about it. And bringing it back to what we were talking about with disclosure, there's a lot of people out there on the internet, they'll freak out. They see the TikTok video, or they'll see the new Pentagon video about these, like a little UFO blip on a radar. That's the fast food of disclosure. That's the water cooler conversation for the skeptical, pragmatic-minded folks that don't know that we are being visited in profound ways, and we always have been. Yep. But that's just the fast food chitter-chatter. As you mentioned before, how this works is that through stuff like the James Webb telescope, that things that are replacing the Hubble, we have more powerful telescope technology. In the next 3 years, we're going to start taking a peek into more of these Earth-like planets, they call them, in the Goldilocks zone. And we'll say, oh my God, we can now see clearer than ever. They have life there. We can confirm it. This astrobiology. And they'll say, okay, we have something there. And then Musk and Tesla will just drip the technology that we know already exists, the anti-gravitics and everything, and we'll have the means to that we will become the colonizers, that will think that we're making the discovery, and we'll go out there and do it. But Musk himself, he knows exactly what's going on. If you watch the news very carefully, he just said, he's selling all of his houses, all of his material possessions. He's getting the hell out of here by 2025. And he also said, he made a very curious comment. Did you see that? He goes, my stock price is too high. And as soon as he did that, the stocks dropped. He buys them up, and then he becomes the majority vote, right?
Yeah, that's what he did. He knows what's going on. And
Genius.
Yeah, he is. And so we're going to have CRISPR technology change our genes. We're going to have a universal basic income. We're going to have designer babies. All of this is coming at us, and there's not really much we can do. It's almost like some kind of science fiction future that they scripted out a long time ago, and they've gotten us ready via entertainment and other vehicles for this big transition that's happening. And I don't know if I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're wrong, or I hope you're right, or that this is going to happen. I'm not sure.
I hope I'm wrong, that we can just Netflix and chill for a couple more weeks, and it all goes back, to a going out to the store without seeing all these masks for a while. But there's an old saying that new beginnings are often disguised as painful endings. Now, it's interesting, Jay, because we know that this has been going on our planet for a long time. We mentioned the book of Genesis, but if we go back to even in the ancient stories of the Vedas, in the Vedas, you go back into the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Samarangana, Sutradhara, and all the stuff that came down into the Bhagavad Gita and everything. These stories were talking about Vimanas. They were talking about flying machines. It was just like the story of Enoch. You go into the Mahabharata, book 5 of the Mahabharata is talking about Arjuna. Arjuna is ascending into heaven. And it's, again, the story is amazing there. It's talking about he's conversing with these beings. They're talking about 3 worlds. There's a war there, probably Mars, the stuff that we know has gone on. I mean, the same old story. These beings are very much looking over our Earth and our progress. This is a zoological experiment. We know we're being drip fed these things, and we're being monitored and looked after about 3,000 light years away from here. So a lot of what we're being given, a lot of what we're being going through are the steps that a civilization would go through. Some of the technology that's been told to me, though, it's very interesting. I've been told that there's going to be some wars over the next few years, obviously, some restructuring of things. The Middle Eastern stuff is going to keep taking steps, obviously, in the world stage, politically wise. I was told that in the process on our way there, that I was told that we would get interactive holograms very quickly that work at a denser subatomic particle level. A photon works at 300,000 kilometers per second or so, but the ability for something to, let's say, walk in the room with you, shake your hand, hand you a document, let's say, and disappear before your eyes. They've had that technology for over 30 years. The way that you watch Netflix or something in your living room is you're going to be interacting with that holographically. All of that's going
to will be also.
Absolutely. You're going to be immersed into that. The ability to go further into the depths of the mind, obviously the acts of unlocking the neuroreceptors and areas of the mind and memory. They're going to be using nanomedicine, which we discussed on the last show. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it. Again, it's just some of the blueprints of what they already have. Also, the ability to be able to scan the body. You mentioned CRISPR technology. We know that they will be able to use certain light, sound, frequency, and whatnot on us to unlock the optic nerve, to be able to rebuild the eye. Education is going to be a lot different because obviously our financial system is going to change. So what we call university, what we call learning is going to change in major ways. What's that?
Education is going to be some of the biggest changes occur.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But where I was told the real stretch is that after 2030. 2030 is when we hit a major mile point marker. Longevity will be unlocked in our future. The telomeres will be unlocked down to the mitochondria in our cells. As you and I have discussed, the goblets and the foglets and all this stuff in our mitochondria fascinates them up there. We have a very, very unique mitochondria. But as we go through that, in the 2030s, there is going to be a change not only in our role as we play in space and where we're going from there. You might say that things like the League of Nations or the UN and all those things are going to be changed. Our power structures will be changed. And they're going to be today what you call Space Force. What we've traditionally, what Reagan used to refer to as Star Wars and all that. There's going to be more of what we call our ruling on down here in our structures is going to more include an idea of space. We're going to move out into still some changes of modernizing the Middle East in the 2030s. I was told that there's going to be more of a unification and a remodeling. That is the kind of idea, to have these really super highly advanced, philosophically superior cities moving up into the date of 2045. So eventually what I was told is that currency on this planet is going to become irrelevant. Now, why I'm saying that is that I was already talking to Deep Prasad about this, is that he's a physicist, and he told me he's working on the algorithms already for stuff that would be the ability to be able to, if you want food, for example, just almost like you would use a 3D printer. You'd be able to just have this food like a materializer that would be able to restructure it down to the molecular level. You'd be able to dematerialize things.
If everything is plasma, then it makes sense that you could find the address of an apple, the genetic address, and create it. It would be it's completely scientifically possible. It's not at all impossible. So yeah, you'll be able to just dial up and get food just like on Star Trek.
Yes, and that's what I have been told, is that it's already kind of in the works, or that the technology exists in some form. So with that being said, you have that aspect of it. So food is irrelevant, or not food is irrelevant. Food will be irrelevant for some people. Like I was saying to you on the last show, what I was told about the silicon hexagonal structures that are graphene based, that the nanotechnologies that are potentials, I'm not saying that that's the must that people must do, that it would use nitrogen and hydrogen from outside of a person's body so that it would create their own food and water in the body. So eating and drinking would become optional. So currency becomes something that in the future is not really needed to sustain yourself on the planet. That there are means, as we move towards being a more advanced civilization by 2045, you can imagine that with these recessive genes being removed from the picture, if that is their plan, not saying it's my plan, I'm just saying if that is the plan as it appears to be, then there is a more peaceful spacefaring civilization that reaches the next level and heights of their spiritual, philosophical, and greater means of growth and development.
Yeah, well, Arthur C. Clarke said the ultimate goal of technology is total unemployment. So maybe that's where we're heading, and which might be a great world. Be like artists, and you can take synthetic psychedelics, and there's all sorts of things that we can do to have a good time. But so I'm going to ask you this: the alien, or I call them the extraterrestrials, are behind this, and they have been saying for years in abductions and things that we're too aggressive, and that we can't join the Galactic Brotherhood because we're too aggressive and we're quarantined here until we lose that. Is this part of that, losing that aggression so that we can join the other people out there?
It certainly appears that that is what is going on. There is a very famous case that took place with the president of Kalmykia back in '97 in Moscow, Krishan Ilyumzhinov, who was the world's chess champion. He was the FID world chess champion that beat Garry Kasparov, who was the guy that beat Deep Blue, the supercomputer. Well, Krishan Ilyumzhinov beat him, and this was the only Buddhist province in southwestern Russia. It's amazing that he comes out with this incredible story that he said that there he was minding his own business. He was in his place, his servants, his people were in his place. And he goes out onto his balcony one night when he was out in Moscow, and this incredible translucent tube comes down out of the heavens and floats right before him. And these two beings get out, and they're in these yellow suits, and they say, "Come with us. We have to talk to you for a while." And they take him up there, and they say to him, "Well, first of all, we want to tell you, we invented the game of chess. We gave it to the Persians, okay? And, we want to tell you about what's going on Earth. The reason we don't come down there and hang out with you guys and talk to you guys, because you guys are too barbarous. It's how you treat your animals, how you treat each other. You're killing each other. This is a reason that, it's just too violent down there at this time for you guys to integrate with the greater galactic family that's out there." So it appears that on all these cases that we look at, that these folks up there, they're very interested and invested in us, but they stay and remain behind the scenes like you would watching a terrarium or an area like that. You don't want to get involved and tap on the glass, but you're watching to see how this civilization or these people are developing, which I think if that's what it appears to be, I'm certainly rooting for us. I'm excited to see, us make it to the next level.
Well, I mean, the other thing is that without that aggressive gene, we would not have gotten here. That's where we are right now. That's the thing. And, they're correcting their original mistake, or maybe they knew that you had to have the aggressive gene to get to this part of a civilized world, but now it's no longer useful and it's time to correct it. And I think that could be what's going on here.
Right. I mean, how many times, Jay, have we looked around the world? And I'm just saying this as an outside perspective. If I take myself outside of this position and I look at it from another perspective, I say, how many times have we looked around the world and we said to ourselves, wouldn't it be great, despite the fact that we have all these supercomputers and MacBooks and iPhones and Samsung phones or whatever it is, and we have all this technology, we think we're so great and advanced, but we look around the world, we turn on the news, and there's all this killing, there's all this violence, and there's all this greed and destruction, and we see all this craziness in the world. We know, for example, when we look at the work of the great Dr. Robert Hare, who wrote books on psychopathy, he documented the idea that through snakes and suits and everything else like that there are people on this planet, perhaps it's how their prefrontal cortex of their brain works, that they enjoy causing pain and suffering for other people. This is a genetic trait that they've identified that is a very scary trait in some cases, but there are percentages of the population that have that. Maybe we can attribute that over to our reptilian brain and whatnot. But like you said, is this something that's been polluted into our genetic mixture that if it could be corrected, would that be such a bad thing?
I think it was part of how we got here. I mean, we had to be aggressive to get here. And, but we're not as aggressive as we used to be. I remember my dad's generation. The best way you can see my father's generation is go see Martin Scorsese's film Casino. They really were like that. They were seriously violent people. I mean, I can't even describe to you the violence that they went. And my grandparents' generation was even more violent, especially to animals. They had no feelings towards animals at all. If a deer would walk down the street in my hometown 50 years ago, there'd be 20 guys out with guns shooting it. Now a deer can walk down the street and nobody does anything. So that aggression is going away. So at this stage, I don't know. I will miss the aggression in some ways, but in some ways I won't miss it because, frankly, I'm tired of violent males too. Yeah, no, we have gone through a lot. Now, it is reassuring that, like I said, in a very similar way to how you get your information, as researchers, we have to continually look at as many places as possible. We've looked to our ancient past. We've looked at these cycles. So we look at what our scientists are saying. What are our philosophers saying? What are people on the front lines of this thing telling us? But at the same time, when I've talked to the remote viewers,
They tell me a lot of interesting things. And they tell me we have a very bright, beautiful future ahead with big, happy changes. After we get through these things, there are going to be certain forces in the world, these old power structures, that are going to be antiquated. We will move past our technological training wheels. It was told to me in the briefings I received that it was important that we talked about these things now and not bury our heads in the sand with some sort of superstitious, ignorant attitude and run away into the hills, but we face it head on, because we are an infinite consciousness, that we come from places of unimaginable power and light, and we will transmute this and go beyond it. One thing I want to add in, Jay, that I think would be interesting for us to discuss, when I was talking to the remote viewers and they were telling me about this beautiful, incredible future that we have in the future, I always throw in questions for them. Like when I was talking to Patricia last time, I always throw in questions and I say to them, can you tell me about certain people in history and certain things? And they told me a very interesting fact and I've gotten this from more than one source, that the different musicians that we've seen throughout history that had a conspiracy attached to them. So I asked about Elvis Presley and they said, no, he's dead. I asked about, Marilyn Monroe and whatnot. I was very interestingly told that the rapper Tupac Shakur never died. Patricia was very adamant on that. When I reached his name, she said, no, he did not die. She said, and this is someone, she finds bodies all the time. She can tell right away. She said, there's a certain smell that comes over and everything that she can tell. She said, absolutely not. She said, he was given a new identity. Yep. And somebody else was there to run his estate. Which a woman came up that no doubt it would have been perhaps his mother, Afeni Shakur. And she said that today he's living on a tropical island. Now, I obviously wouldn't go any further with that in respect to his identity, but you told me something that was rather interesting about John Lennon.
Yeah, John Lennon is still alive. He's 80 years old. He's living in Michigan. I'm going to do a show in the future about John Lennon and talk about it. And I'm also going to do a show in the future on the Zapruder film, the film where Kennedy is shot. I'm going to reveal a version of the Zapruder film that nobody has ever seen. And it's going to shake your world. I'm reticent to do that because of all the Kennedy conspiracy people are going to lose their crap when they find out what I have discovered about the Zapruder film. But there's a lot of revelations. But yeah, John Lennon, I believe, faked his death. It's Mark Stacer is his name. He's a Lennon impersonator. He's the only impersonator who looks just like the person he's impersonating. And there's a film, a Canadian film called Leave Him Be, which I've seen but has now disappeared. So if anybody has a DVD of Leave Him Be, please contact me, because I want to watch that documentary again. But it's a pseudo documentary, I think. I think it was financed by Lennon himself. And there's a song in there called "I Was There," and he sings it, and it's about, I was there. I was there when we toured the USA the first time. I was there when we did all this, and it's fascinating. And Miles Mathis, he's a great researcher, one of my favorite researchers on the web. So just type in John Lennon, Miles Mathis, and read his great article about John Lennon. It's a real eye opener, I'll tell you. Shook my world, because when John Lennon died, I was really sad because I like John Lennon. And so anyway, yeah, they fake their deaths all the time. I believe that Jim Morrison faked his death too. I don't believe any 27-year-old would buy a grave in a mortuary. But they don't even think you're going to die at 27. So, I'm very suspicious of that one too.
So he was going through some different doors.
Interesting. So what's great about this show, what we're talking about, is that we're connecting the extraterrestrials with secret societies, with the technocrats that are outrolling this thing that's happening, using the corona as the very first step in this process. You can now see that all the DNA testing going on in the past to find out what your lineage is probably some kind of intelligence operation to do a genetic mapping of all the DNA and figuring out how they're going to do the CRISPR technology the right way. I think they probably already have achieved their goal. they're probably working for extraterrestrial forces. Are the extraterrestrial forces going to show themselves? Are we actually going to see them at some point?
I was told that we would see them have more of a presence here once things settle down. That's not to say that we aren't going to go and make discoveries and confirm life out there. We already know that something I've been told is that on Europa, that there's these 25-foot wide whale-like creatures swimming around on there. And when I've been talking to my friend Mark D'Antonio about that, he's done some incredible work. And I know you know him too. He's done some incredible work with looking at astrobiology and what's around our universe. I mean, he does tell me, he says, well, we don't know about that yet, but we know there's water on the surface. Is it dependable based on light and everything else, whether they could exist there? But I was told that we would make that discovery in the coming years. I mean, we know that we just put these microscopic animals up on the moon called tardigrades, and that they're surviving up there. So more and more we're going to be making the discoveries. But I want to throw that ball back to you, Jay. You told me potentially that you heard something could be coming up, that we could be getting a threat of that sort of thing coming to us a little sooner.
Yeah, I've heard that that it's part of it's theater. It's not real, but it is real because people will get hurt. But we're going to be attacked by extraterrestrial forces, and this is going to necessitate the creation of all these technologies to save us. And by 2024, we're going to have all of these things that they already have, of course, and they're going to do it just like you said. They're going to use front companies like Musk, Apple, all these companies to put all the stuff out, and it's going to happen really fast, and it's going to be bewildering. And some of us will say, hey, wait, let's take a second look at this. But I was also told that they destroy. So when they make an invention, they try to destroy how they invented it. Okay, this is a big problem because they don't want anybody else to invent it, right? So all the records are destroyed, which is really going to become a serious problem. And so when they release all this stuff, we're not going to have any history. It's going to look like it was invented right then and there, because there's not going to be any written history that we can go back and look at. Like 30 years ago, when they invented zero G, did they, vehicles, that's all gone. There's no blueprints. There's no nothing. That's not how these guys roll. They don't want you to know, but that they are involved in criminal activity, which they are, because we wouldn't have had Fukushima and a lot of other things if they'd rolled out this stuff earlier. But it sounds like they finally are pressured into it, and they're going to do a limited hangout, and we're at the right on the cusp of this brave new world that's coming, and I don't think there's anything we can do about it. I live out in the country. I grow my own food, and I think I'm going to become an anachronism to the future.
With that being said, before you leave this topic, you said something that triggered a memory for me. I was remembering back to the conference where you and I just last were in Nevada, which everybody was coughing at that conference. In fact, I was going back and looking at a clip that I did from there, and half the audience was coughing. Barbara Lamb was, in her room for a week. Everybody, it swept through that thing for sure. But when we were there, I remember talking to you. I came up and one of the questions I asked you when you were up on stage is that I was asking you about the Aquarian Messiah. Now, I'd love for you to elaborate on that as our closing mark, because here's the thing. I was told that we can clean up our oceans using nanoparticles. Is it possible that our next Messiah could be the water bearer that is here to symbolically, the mystery schools will put him forth to clean up the water and other things?
Yeah, well, the other thing is that the main goal, exoteric goal of Freemasonry is to build the third temple, Solomon's third temple, and go to Freemasonic halls and always have a picture of what it's going to look like. And there's a lot of political moves right now. Netanyahu is part of a group called Chabad, Chabbad, I think it's pronounced or spelled. And this is a group which advocates not eating meat, following the Noahide laws, stopping all wars. And it sounds like what I think they're going to do is they're going to bring forth a hero who's going to save the world, and we're all going to turn to him and think he is the Messiah. And of course, the Christians think that person's the Antichrist. The Hebrews think that he's their next Messiah. And I've been told by a rabbi that the Messiah is already here. He's living with us right now. So
that's interesting. You remember on the last show, and people will have to go back to our last show to hear some of what we were talking about. We were talking about how the book of Revelation in the Bible is actually the Atlantis story that was kicked out of the Bible over a dozen times. It's not a Christian book, but it was added in there. We have a prophecy that talks about something called the wormwood that's like an asteroid that will come into the heavens. Now, one of my briefings that I had that was very scientific based, I was told that in the years 2029 to 2032, that we're going to be very, very, very afraid of an asteroid hitting us. It's going to be absolutely massive, bigger than anything we've seen in the news even recently with Atlas and everything. It's going to be gigantic. And this thing, I was told, it's going to come towards us, but it's going to skim past us. It's going to light up our skies, and just debris are going to hit us. So guys, if you're hearing this now, remember we talked about it, that in the future, you don't have to worry about it when they're bringing that up. They're going to really emphasize this 2029 to 2032. Again, I was told it was just going to skim past us. Debris would brush here, but they're not going to take us out. But that was also predicted. And it's interesting when we go back into this symbolism, as I know you're very familiar with this, Jay, you're the esoteric master as far as I'm concerned, a walking encyclopedia of these things, that Jesus was considered this figure of Pisces, because we know before him and leading out of the Taurian age, Mithra was ripping the head off the bull and everything. We went into Aries. Jesus was multiplying 2 fish and encountering 2 fishermen. Well, when you say to him, where are you going to be? How long are you going to be with us? He says, I'm going to be with you to the end of the eon, which is the end of the age. Well, if you go to Luke 22:10 in the Bible, it says the disciples are saying, Master, Master, where are you going to be at the Last Supper? And he says, meet me at the house with the man with the water pitcher. So my question is, could this next guy that the mystery schools launch out, could they launch a universal religion on us? As we know, the Vatican's very much modernizing. Could this guy be like, let's say, a scientific technocrat or something, or maybe an ET? He dies. He's born at the winter solstice. He dies. They resurrect him with peptides and all the stuff. We can bring the brain back now. He's got 12 helpers or scientists. Could we see something like that? Do you think we're going to head to a universal religion?
Yeah, I do. I think that's the universal religion is guaranteed. I guarantee it. And yeah, all those things are going to happen. It's going to be, they're like a corporation. They test things. So if you're a corporation, you want to introduce a new product, you go to like Indiana or Indianapolis, and you introduce it first in Indianapolis, see how it rolls out, then into the larger state, then into the United States, and into the world. And I would say that the USSR was a test to see how well they could function in a communist environment. I even believe that what happened in Germany in the 1940s was also another corporate test. I think this corona thing is another corporate test. Each is a test to carry out a little bit further. How can we manage this better, right? What mistakes did we make here? Then they do a post-mortem, and they're going to do a post-mortem on this. So what I'm saying is, if you look at these tests, then you can kind of predict the end game. So the end game is going to be some kind of socialism. I hate to say it because I'm not a socialist. I actually detest socialism, but I don't see any, this is what their plan is. It's going to be universal basic income. It's going to be a socialist plan with capitalist additions to it, though. So it'll be 2-tiered. Creative people will be in this tier. They want to work, they want to do things, and there'll be a tier of people who just don't want to work. And the creative people are going to have to create enough money and power to supply the universal basic income. And I think that's probably going to happen. I don't think there's anything we can do about it. If you guys have any ideas of different ways to do about it, you should probably start the discussion now, because
I'm very interested to see what's going to happen in Europe, because historically in Europe, I mean, there's been all these wars and fighting. We've had the things like the Inquisition, and before that, these sort of bloody turnovers of things. And right now, Germany is in a key position. Germany's in a key position because they devalued their currency. There was a lot of loans that were brought out over into Italy and Spain and whatnot. There's these austerity payments that are coming through. It wouldn't take long if, you have an economic collapse and reset of what's going to happen there. We talked about what could happen here, which is why I would love to see a peaceful transition for humanity that moves forward in the most progressive ways. But when those things come up with those austerity payments, and think people are upset about where their economies are going, it doesn't take too long for a Mussolini to rise up. So you have things that are transitioning, but ultimately we must keep this in mind, that it's not enough to be optimistic about things or have positive thoughts. It's also it has to be matched with what is right and proper, and to have this progress that we're all making. So we will get there. And Jay, I know you know that too. We will get there to a peaceful future that will be wonderful for all of us.
I hope so. I hope, and I hope not too many people have to die in the process. Also, that makes what we're talking about will help explain too that it's sort of like they're doing a jubilee. In the Bible, they talk about a jubilee every 50 years, and we're kind of going into a jubilee. All debts will be forgiven, and people are getting out of jail too right now. So.
Yeah, they're letting them all out very interestingly in particular areas because of the CV. They're saying, well, let's let these guys out. But again, it's sort of this order that comes out of chaos, the order to the cosmos that Carl Jung talked about. So we will get there. And even if we have some scary times, I'd love to leave people with something that Fred Rogers talked about, Mr. Rogers. He said when he used to sit there and he would sit with his mother, and I think he was just a beautiful soul, Mr. Rogers. But he said he would sit there with his mother and he would watch the news. And he said when scary things would come on the news and he would be frightened, his mother would say, look for the helpers. You can always see that no matter what's going on, that there are helpers and there are people doing good in the world. And we always have to know that there is this force of good.
That's right. And there's spiritual forces too at work, and we can't underestimate the influence that they have on what's going to happen too.
Totally agreed.
All right, Johnny. Well, thanks for sharing what you know with us. I really appreciate it. I hope the audience does too. And thank you, everybody. I'm Jay Weidner. You've been watching Reality Check, and it's been quite a reality check. I'm going to have Danny Estulin on next, and he's going to accentuate a lot of what we've been talking about here and go even deeper. So it's going to be a 1-2 punch. All right.
Thanks so much for having me on, Jay, and I can't wait to hear that next show.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm really excited about it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.